Good morning, everybody. Welcome to House Transportation. Before we get started, if I can ask our Vice Chair Gorski to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, sir. And to get started, I'm going to open up the public hearing being 9:32 on Senate Bill 13 FN relative to the recovery of search and rescue expenses. Good morning, Senator Waters.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Senator David Waters, District 4, and proud to be a member of the Transportation Committee in the Senate, but also the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which actually had this bill instead of Transportation this time around. I'm introducing Senate Bill 13 relative to recovery of search and rescue expenses at the request of the Fish and Game Commission to permit the Division of Motor Vehicles to suspend or revoke a driver's license when that driver has failed to make payment to the Fish and Game Department for the reasonable costs of a search and rescue for which they are found to be negligent. Now, let me note that already in RSA 20626BB, so in state statute, we already gave the authority to Fish and Game to bill a search and rescue operation, and then if the payment is not there, the Fish and Game is given under that provision the suspension of a driver's license if they're unable to collect the fees. So that's in statute, but it was determined that we needed to do this. Two things. First, you'll see that the bill adds language that says now just aside of notify, we have to certify to someone that this request is being made. That's a higher bar, which I think is appropriate, and it sets forth a process you'll see in the bill about notification, about possible appeals, about information provision as requested by the person who's might be subject to the suspension. So I think that's all good in terms of transparency and setting a bar, because this is a kind of a last resort for the department to need to take this kind of action to collect those outstanding costs for search and rescue operation. It also became determined that, well, yes, we had this authority for Fish and Game, but we didn't have the appropriate authority in state statute, so that, yeah, then the DMV could take action on that. So that's what you see in the last paragraph of the bill, is to kind of button that up, to say the request can be made, here's the process, and then there's the authority of DMV to do it. We have Lieutenant Mancini here from Fish and Game Department. But let me just talk a little bit about the background here. I mean, I was on Fish and Game in the House for a couple terms, and we were dealing with this issue, back 15, 16 years ago, and we've dealt with it, I think, in very good ways in the years since, about the problems of search and rescue operations. These can be extraordinarily expensive. They can involve helicopters. They can put the lives of our conservation officers and other people at great risk, especially in the wintertime, trying to find what may be a negligent hiker. And a number of years ago, it was getting to the point that this self-funded department was having to essentially take money away from other kinds of necessary operations of the department because of this burgeoning debt over very expensive Fish and Game search and rescue operations. And so the consideration was, well, maybe we need to start adding some general fund money to Fish and Game, and we made that decision to add some. But I think the real stroke of genius here was to do the Hike Safe card, right? That you can go, and that's it. You get out of fee, or not get out of jail, but it's a get out of fee free card. And that if you purchase a Hike Safe card, which a lot of people want to do to contribute to the department and its operations, keep our trails safe and so on, you can do that. And then if you are subject to search and rescue, even if you're negligent, you're covered. It's your insurance policy, and that's been very successful program. Some other states have done it, and that's a really good move. But we have folks who do not buy the Hike Safe card, oftentimes from out of state, and search and rescue operation, is determined that they are negligent, and let me say that that negligence is a narrow category because, you know, people get into trouble on the trails, right? It's not if you slip and you break an ankle or something like that. But if you're truly negligent and shouldn't be out there or in conditions and circumstances where any reasonable person would think that that was negligence, then the Fish and Game Department decides you are subject to this charge for search and rescue costs. But then what do we do if they don't pay? And one alternative is to try to collect that money. It's very expensive to try to collect money from folks. And it's also sometimes people just, you can't get them and it just won't pay. So the one remaining tool we have in our tool chest is this license suspension. And we have reciprocal arrangements with other states so that if we suspend a license suspended, but for someone who has an out-of-state license, we can have that enforced. And so that's what we do on a variety of things. But it is a kind of a tool of last resort. But I think given our commitment to the Fish and Game Department, I really hope we can support it. And Transportation Committee appropriate will, I'm sure, look at this very carefully. I'm always a little anxious about anything that takes away someone's driving privileges because that's how you get to work and other things. But, we have there's a set number, I think about 80, I think Colonel Jordan said about 80 people, and maybe Lieutenant Mancini will follow up on that, just the numbers we're talking about. But they need our help. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to answer a few questions, but I kind of really would at this point like to defer to the lieutenant.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the committee? Wow, I won't let you off
Thank
that
you.
easy.
I'll
I've
be
got a
back.
couple.
We're in hearings over in the Senate, so, oops, okay, glad to.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Jones.
I just want to know, is this strictly for state land or does this also cover federal lands and private lands and so on? And so it pertain to them all?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm incorrect there, but we do search and rescue wherever somebody needs it, wherever they are. Yes, if they're on a trail in New Hampshire and they need search and rescue, we're going to go try
Would
to.
the Hike Safe card cover all those
everything.
lands also?
Yes, everything.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay. Couple of quick ones, if you don't mind, Senator.
sure.
The Hike Safe program, how much money does that generate? Do you know? I have those. You have those? Okay, I'll defer. And the other one, maybe you'll defer as well. In terms of determining negligence, who does that? Or do we have a definition in statute for that? Another one? Okay,
Yeah.
you're good. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I'll see you in a while. Bye-bye.
Next up, Chair recognizes Bob Mancini from New Hampshire Fish and Game.
Good morning, Chair Walsh, members
morning.
of the Transportation Committee. My name's Lieutenant Bob Mancini, and I'm a lieutenant over at our headquarters. I work directly with Colonel Jordan, Major Walsh, and Captain Eastman. During my career, I've been a member of our search and rescue team, the dive team, and I've also had a K-9. So over the course of those years, I've participated in several hundred missions, and the things I'll speak to today are based on my personal experience and just the data that we've derived from our databases. I'm going to try to touch on a few of the things that Senator Waters went over just to offer a little bit of detail, but thank you, Senator Waters, very much for offering all of those facts. In 2022, Hike Safe generated $311,000. Currently, right now, it's generated about $150,000. The SAR fund, which Senator Waters discussed, was created in the 1980s, and basically what it did was $1 from boats, snow machines, and OHRVs was essentially put into a pool that has averaged about $180,000 over the course of time. Not so much in the very beginning, but average over that time, it has been about $180,000. Some years a little higher, some years a little lower. Historically, our staff respond to about 180 search and rescue missions per year. During COVID, that was a little bit of inflated, but it's historically been about 180. And in that time, the average cost per year has been about $300,000. Some years higher, nearly $400,000. Some years a little lower, about $250,000. With regards to the bills, I want to kind of shine a little light on, we are not sending out a ton of bills. So if we're averaging 180 missions per year, in 2022, only 8 bills were sent out. In 2021, 17 bills were sent out. In 2020, 15 bills. So when we're determining negligence, I think it is a very narrow focus, and we're trying to be reasonable when applying whether somebody's negligent or not. And that's based on the field observation. So a lieutenant is the incident commander on these missions, and they are going to make a recommendation to the colonel whether somebody was negligent in their activity. And a billing memo is sent up, and it's included with the report. But our process, excuse me, our process in the law enforcement division is that a member of our staff identifies the person that's been involved in this incident, and they get the best address for them. They ask them, is this where you get your mail, so on and so forth. A report is generated, and then a bill is sent. After it's been determined that such bill is necessary, a bill is sent. Phone calls are made. There's follow-up with multiple ways of sending it in the mail and on the phone. And after exhausting all of the options to collect the funds, that is when we would ask that somebody's license be suspended. After exhausting multiple phone calls, offering payment plans, providing a hearing, even reducing the amount of the bill, that's when we would ask that someone's driving privileges would be suspended. So we're not trying to make this run rampant, and we're not trying to put anybody in a deficit for their life to be able to travel to work. But there is a real cost associated with every one of these missions, and there's a lot of things that are unforeseen in the future. You know, a recent helicopter rescue alone exceeded $80,000. The National Guard submits a billing waiver to the National Guard Bureau, so the Fish and Game Department doesn't have to incur that cost. If that ever changes, that was one mission, $82,000. So if we don't have some teeth in this bill that originated in 2015, 20626 BB was in 2015, and the legislative authority and the intent of that was to do what we're asking to do today, was that after multiple attempts to try to get somebody to pay, the DMV would suspend their driving privileges. That happened back in 2015. It just, during that time, most recently, Director of Motor Vehicle Bilecki, who had, she's not there now, it's Marasco, but she requested to us to try to firm this up. And Colonel Jordan, over the past year and a half, worked with the Attorney General's office to firm up this bill, which is what you have in front of you, Senate Bill 13FN. So I hope I've offered just a little bit more clarity on all of this, and I'm happy to try to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee? Representative Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have missed, you may have said this and I may have missed it, but what is the average bill that was sent out just for one of these years?
I'll run through the cost of each bill for the 8 that happened in 2022.
Perfect.
There was one bill for $752. There was a bill for $206. There was a bill for $1,216. Another bill for $169. A bill for just over $2,500, and then another bill for $1,000. So some of these are they're not, huge money. Could it be? Again, when you have a multiple day search that involves a lot of officers that have been on regular time and overtime, and equipment's been used, it could get expensive. I'll try to go through one that happened in recent. I'm looking at 2020 and 2021 right now. The highest bill that I see sent out in the past 3 years was for $4,025.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to follow up on her question. Could you provide the committee with, say, the last 3 years of these expenses in the future, not today? And what's the total, everything considered, average expense for the year for all the search and rescues? Not just the ones that may get a bill, but in general. And the reason I'm asking these questions is because we currently have retained House Bill 650, which is seeking to remove the suspension of licenses for everything that's not motor vehicle related. So the more importance we can see with this, it might help.
Sure. I can certainly provide the committee with the bills that were within the last 3 years. I have that form here. I'd have to make copies. With regard to the total cost, it has been total cost for dive, search and rescue, walkaways, Alzheimer's, missing children has been anywhere between 180 and 240 missions per year over the last decade. And the average cost has been between, 350,000 coming upwards of $400,000. And those costs have been offset by the Hike Safe card, which again, last year, 311,000, and then the search and rescue fund, which has the OHRV, snow machine, and boat registration. So thankfully, that Hike Safe has been working. Obviously, we can't force anybody to buy a $25 individual card, and we can't force anybody to buy the $35 family card, but that funding mechanism has been working, and it's helping stabilize things. But we have 1.4 million people in the state of New Hampshire, and it's a beautiful state, and the outdoor recreation community, it's only growing. It's not just hunting, fishing, trapping. There's lots of people that are kayaking and boating, and just out walking and enjoying nature. So I think a bill like this is important for the future, because in the event that you have less people that actually want to contribute to the department, and you have more people that are out just for their own intrinsic benefit, they don't have an overarching, they don't necessarily care about the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. They want to come and recreate. They're from far away. This bill will give us a little bit of leeway, if you will, to kind of collect the funds associated with the search and rescue missions of our state. It's not a huge financial impact. I can think of it being much more important for not reducing it for all the other stuff, because we have a lot of people that don't pay, a speeding ticket, and we have a lot of people that don't pay a snow machine or a hunting or a fishing ticket. And one of the only reasons that they do end up paying the court is because their license privileges is going to get suspended. So I'm scared about that one for sure.
We needed your testimony on 650. Representative Sykes.
No, I'm okay. My question was asked by Representative
Okay.
Fox.
Representative Gorski.
Thank you, and thank you, Lieutenant, for taking my question. You mentioned that the process is you find someone negligent, and then, you send the letter out, and then there's multiple calls and all that. Can you give us an idea of, from the time that it's determined that it's negligent, what's the time period that all these calls are done over? Is it a couple months? Is it, half a year? What is it?
It depends. I know you probably hate hearing that, but some people are very, very compliant and are accountable. So you send them a bill and they call you and say, I want to take care of this right away. In that regard, the mission happened in February. The report was completed by the end of February. March, the billing memo went out. By the end of March, it's resolved. So I would say 6 to 8 weeks, it could be resolved if somebody takes that accountability. We wouldn't be as hasty if somebody didn't answer the written record. So now we're calling. Now we're trying to do additional research, reaching out to a state. Do you have an updated address for this person? Even though they supplied us with an address, we're looking at motor vehicle records to see if there's a different address somewhere, and we're sending it certified mail to multiple residences sometimes and trying to do follow-up calls and calling a person that was associated with that rescue. Do you have updated contact information? So all of that could be 6 months or more by the time you're doing some follow-up, because these people are from out of state. I had one where a gentleman was from Texas and he was out on the trail. He was a through hiker, and he said he never got any of that stuff. And so it took months to track him down, and ultimately he did comply, and he paid some of it. But I would say a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks, and a maximum it could be upwards of a year. And if they want to push the process and they want to have a hearing, and then they want to challenge it all the way up to the Superior and Supreme Court, it could be years. I've seen that in my career as well.
Well,
Yep. Hello.
you mentioned out-of-staters. What happens with out-of-staters? Can we revoke, like you mentioned, the person from Texas? If they didn't pay, do we have the ability, would this bill have the ability to revoke licenses in Texas?
There's reciprocity. There is reciprocity amongst driving privileges in the United States. I couldn't speak to every state that's reciprocal with the state of New Hampshire, but I can generally there is reciprocity, and especially in the New England states where those are the folks that are going to be more likely recreating in our state. Yes.
Further questions? Representative, go ahead. See,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. I was wondering about how many search and rescue events you have in a year, and break that down with how many have had the hike safe cards or some other provision, and, down to how many you're having to chase after. Is that separate? The 18 that you mentioned, is that separate from ones who paid right away when you sent them a bill?
So breaking down the number of people that have a hike safe card, I don't have that compared to the 180. I can tell you that sometimes the people that we rescue do have a hike safe card, and they're like, I have a hike safe card. I don't have it with me, but I have one. Can you look it up? So they're all excited. And then people are also that have hunting, fishing, OHRV, snow machine. They'll also let you know. But we have not historically billed anybody that has any of those things. If they have a hike safe card, if they have a family hike safe, if they have a snow machine registration, OHRV registration, boating registration, hunting, fishing, we have just not billed them. So if you are a consumptive user for the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, if you're putting any resource into the kitty, we have not billed that person. This is for the people that have been negligent and haven't done anything from a cost perspective to help bolster the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. The consumptive users, the people that are paying the salaries and doing that, we have not billed them. And I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question, Representative.
All right, thank you.
further questions? I guess, Representative Sellers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I might have missed part of this. The hike safe card, could you explain that again for one? And I just wanted to find out, have you thought about, and this is, you could probably explain it as you go along, but is there like an insurance card, if that is, so purchase it, and do you give them maybe a tracking device that's good for the year or something?
So with regard to the hike safe card, in 2022, there was 12,191 hike safe cards that were purchased. Of that, 7,321 were individuals, 4,870 were families. Of that, 6,160 were residents of the state, and 6,031 were non-residents. That number may surprise you, but that's the breakdown, and it totaled $300,000 and $311,000. So it is definitely helping as far as tracking or having a tracking device. We don't have that. The hike safe card is only good for the calendar year. So it's purchased between January 1st and it expires on December 31st. And the Hike Safe card right now is for, if for me as a family, it would cover me, my wife, my 4.5-year-old son, and my 3-year-old daughter. That's who would be covered. If I had stepchildren, they would also be covered. And if I was deemed to be a guardian of the state for another minor, they would be covered. But that's who would be covered under a family plan. The individual plan is self-explanatory. And again, boat, OHRV, snow machine, hunting, fishing license, all provide you with the same guarantees, if you will. And it's not an insurance card. There are agencies, not so much state agencies, but actual insurance companies that will sell you a rescue insurance. But we don't do that.
Further questions? Seeing none, I have one last one, and I'll let you off the hook. We're going to get into our next hearing in a minute anyway. My question is, because I'm always uneasy when I hear that one individual can determine negligence. That's not a judge, by the way. Can you just give me quickly an example of what would be negligence as it's looked at right now, and one that's not?
Sure. So this one might blow your mind, but you asked for an example, so I'll give you one. A very, very wet, forecasted, cold, precipitation was going to be high, winds were going to be extremely high. A person that just went out, that just had a double hip replacement, thought it would be a good idea to take a 60-pound pack up onto the Franconia Ridge Trail in treacherous conditions, and ultimately required a rescue. So that would be one that is, I think that's extreme, but I was on it. I watched officers that I was hiking with come real close to being hypothermic and being, a casualty themselves. So we try to educate folks. We have a Hike Safe program. We're in schools. We reach out to the public. We have, we just had Discover Wild New Hampshire Day where 8,000 people come, and we're really trying to connect people to life outdoors through education. So thankfully that doesn't happen all the time. The vast majority of them that wouldn't be negligent is that, a family went out and they read the map wrong. They got spun around and they took a drainage as opposed to coming down a trail. This little drainage meandered off and they thought it was a trail, and they went down and ended up in a brook drainage and followed that. And they were never on the trail, and they called and panicked, and we try to get them back onto the trail, but they say it's dark and we don't have lights. In that case, we try to work with them. And most of the time those people they'll actually send a donation. They want to take responsibility. So again, I want to point out and circle back that eight bills in 2022, 17 in 2021, and 15 in 2020. This is a small number based on the 180 average that we have. And really it's 2 or 3 people are pushing this process to where it would be the suspension per year. It's a very small number. Most of our people are good. The people that are recreating here are good people.
Thank you very much. I have nobody else signed up to speak on Senate Bill 13, so I'm going to close the public hearing. A couple of minutes to reset, and we'll get into Senate Bill 118. All right, being 10:02, we'll open up the public hearing on Senate Bill 118, requiring children under the age of 2 years to be restrained in a motor vehicle. Chair recognizes the prime sponsor. Welcome back, Senator Fenton.
It's good to be home, as they say. Thank you, Mr. Chair and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent Senate District 10. I'm here today to talk to you about Senate Bill 118, which would require children under the age of 2 to be restrained in a rear-facing car seat. The American Academy of Pediatrics has expanded their car seat recommendations to keep children rear-facing for as long as possible. They did this because it will help save lives. Every month that a child rides rear-facing gives them more time for the head and neck to fully develop. A rear-facing car seat cradles the child's entire body. It only takes 1/4 inch of a stretch for a child's spinal cord to rupture. Using the correct car seat can decrease death or serious injury by 70%. And you'll see an example later on. This bill fills a much-needed gap in child safety laws here in New Hampshire. Rear-facing car seats are no more expensive than front-facing. There's absolutely no reason or extra costs to why you should not have your child rear-facing for as long as possible. This bill does not overlap any existing laws and helps protect our most vulnerable population. It also follows the manufacturer laws so that if your child is larger than average, it does not apply. We had a commission to study this and collect data, and what we found was that rear-facing car seats unequivocally are the better choice. Not a single group or individual who testified told us otherwise. Currently, there is no language to protect this group, and this bill will do just that. We have some experts speaking, so if you have any questions, I urge you to ask them, but I am always open for questions. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Just one for me.
Yes, sir.
You said that it's a choice. It's a logical choice to buy rear-facing. So that means that there are currently front-facing child seats. They would still accommodate the younger and smaller?
So we have someone from CHAD who deals with car seat safety, so we could probably answer that, but there are convertible car seats that can be forward-facing or rear-facing. Yep.
With no other questions, thank you very much.
Guys, let me off easy. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up, Chair recognizes, I think it's James Edston, representing Dartmouth Health, in support of the bill, seeking 5 minutes. Welcome.
For the record, my name is Jim Esden. I work for Dartmouth Health Children's. I'm also the chair for the New Hampshire Safe Kids Coalition. We are in support of this bill, and the reason is children, as you all know, have very weak neck strength. The issue becomes that in the event of a crash, their heads are going to go forward. There can be spinal injuries, neck injuries all along the way. What this bill would do is allow children to ride rear-facing longer, giving that neck strength a chance to grow, to build. And in the event of a crash, we know that the majority of crashes are from the front. Being in that car seat is going to allow them to ride out the initial major crash forces that are happening, and then there'll be the reciprocal forces applied to them when they go forward back after that. So that's one of the reasons that we're very much in support of this. The American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC both recommend that children ride rear-facing as long as their seat will allow them. The nice thing about this bill is that with the 2-year limit in there, what we're doing is, in the past, they used to say 1 year. With this, what it's allowing is the children to ride that, again, be rear-facing. But we all know that there are 2 types of child safety seats. One is the rear-facing only, which is the one you're probably familiar with. It has the carrier. It goes into a base in the car. Those have a limit of, depending on the type of seat, anywhere from 22 to 30 pounds. The type of seat that we're talking about that would accommodate the children is a convertible seat. So it's structured in such a way that the children can ride rear-facing and max out the seat's weight, which in a lot of cases is 40 pounds to 45 pounds, And then it allows the seat to go forward facing. So when they do max that out, they can go and ride forward facing again. So the issue becomes with a lot of parents, they want to see their children, and it's a lot easier to see them when they're riding in that forward facing position. But again, from a standpoint of data and everything else that we have, we know that riding the rear facing is going to be the better one for them. So any questions I can answer for you?
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee? Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming, sir. I just want to add, well, the American Academy of Pediatrics, that's physicians who are concerned about their wealth and well-being of, they're not a third-party certification. Is there like a manufacturer's third-party certification that tells you which equipment is safe and which isn't?
So the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration does a lot of work with car seat testing. There's also the Insurance Institute that tests these car seats out so that they know what kind of crash forces that will happen, and they do crash test some of them.
And that data is available?
That data is available. I don't have it, but I could certainly
No, I'm
get
not
that
asking
for
you
you.
for it, no.
Yep.
The public can find it themselves.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking the question.
Thank you.
The, do you know the number of 0 to 2-year-olds that are in crashes and haven't survived or have been a problem in New Hampshire?
I don't have that number available to me right here, but we can certainly get that for you as well.
Thank you. Further questions? Did you want to follow up? Yep, follow up.
Thank you. The other question I had was the cost of these car seats. I mean, we know the families have to buy a car seat anyway, but you're talking about a special car seat, a convertible one. What about the families that really have maybe a very low income? You know, how are these car seats being provided, or how are they purchasing these?
Okay. So the first part of that question, we can help provide those car seats for them through grants. We have fitting stations around the state of New Hampshire, in at least 50 or 60 of those that can help out parents that need those. The rear-facing seats, the rear-facing only seat with the carry handle and the basket, we don't provide those. We do provide the convertible car seats so that they can use those much longer. And that's the advantage of the convertible. Again, you're using it rear-facing and forward-facing.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Chair recognizes Representative Leon. Opposed to the bill, seeking 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Last year, I participated on the committee to evaluate the data on rear-facing child seats and to figure out what data we had, where the benefits were, and we spoke to a lot of different experts. We actually found that, fortunately, this is not much of a problem in New Hampshire because the number of crashes with injuries to young children is very, 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 very small. We actually don't have any good data on how many children under 2 years old are involved in these crashes, and we don't have any good data on what seats they are in. They are generally broken down in the 0 to 4 year age range, and several of these children were listed as being 1 year old in one of the reports being in a booster seat, which I don't think is actually even really physically possible to have a child under 1 year old in a booster seat. So there are serious problems with our data here in New Hampshire. Beyond that, though, we had some other fantastic data. We had a gentleman come in and on Zoom and speak to us, and actually we'd all be safer in rear-facing car seats because the human body is designed to take impact on the back as you're laying down as opposed to on the front. But there are a lot of other factors that also come into play. When you have these car seats, they do take a lot of space up in the car. I'm a mom to 3 boys, and Let me tell you, it was really hard trying to fit a rear-facing car seat into a sedan with a family of 5. We were able to do that with one of those bucket carriers, the ones that now go up to, some of them actually go up to 35 pounds, but you also have height limits in those seats. When it came time to put my youngest son in a rear-facing seat, one of the convertibles, it was physically impossible to get that into my husband's car without displacing the front passenger. So you'd either have to have that with their knees in the dashboard, which also isn't safe, and you'd have to disable the airbag or possibly not fit anybody. So then when you have a family that doesn't have a giant Sequoia like I do, you end up making low-income families buy a different car to fit their family. We're not talking about the price of a car seat. We're talking about having extra seating capacity to accommodate a car seat for a certain amount of time. We also might be talking about a family that is reducing the amount of food that's going to their kids for an event that has happened, an event that is very, very rare. I believe I can get the numbers for you, but I believe that there were 6 children under 4 who had a significant injury enough to go to the hospital. Not necessarily life-threatening, but a serious injury. Obviously, in recent events, we had a tragedy with some young children in a car, so we do know that those numbers have gone up. Looking at this bill, there's another big problem. When you look at states where they have an age limit, everybody's really excited about when their kid graduates and gets to sit forward-facing. He's 2 years old in one day, let's sit him forward-facing. But extended rear facing is the safer choice. We should be encouraging parents with data and facts to rear face as long as they can with their kids, up to 3, 4, even 5 years old if the child will tolerate it because it is safer. But when we set the limit of 2 years, then we introduce this idea of, well, he's reached the 2nd birthday, so we're going to turn him around. And you actually end up reducing that safety. Basically, it's an education issue. Not all education issues, not all recommendations need to be law. And this law would end up hurting some of our lower income families. And this law really is not necessary here in New Hampshire. We have a safe culture of safety. We have very high seatbelt usage despite not having a law for adults. And we have a lot of families that know that rear facing is the way to go. We just don't need to criminalize the behavior of turning them around sooner if that's what the family needs in order to fit all their family in the car, or because they had some other necessary need. So with that, I'll take any questions, and I can provide the car seat committee report to you in email format later.
That would be great. And I do have one question you touched on. In terms of education, how much of that, if any of that, is provided now in terms of the benefits of a particular type of seat?
There's a lot of information out there. A lot of parents seek out people like the car seat lady and find that information. The pediatricians have that information. When you're going to parenting classes, they have that information. They discuss it with you in your prenatal visits to make sure that you have a car seat that is appropriate. And there's a lot of education that does happen already. And there's also flyers about the car seat installation events as well.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Representative Jones.
Thank you. More a comment than a question.
We'd only take questions here, Representative Jones.
It's a question.
Okay.
Is it true, so now it's a question, that you shouldn't be using car seats that you bought used or bought from a consignment store because they may have been in an accident and they may have met their stress limit already? Is that correct?
Yes, you should never use a car seat whose history you don't know. And if you're involved in an accident at any speed, you are supposed to replace that car seat. Car insurance will replace a car seat for any vehicle that's in an accident if it's been installed at the time of the accident.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very
Actually,
much.
I do have one on the certification by the NTSA about the car seats and the safety.
By all means.
As far as that safety, any car seat that's on the market and is available meets minimum safety standards. And when you end up looking at the data ratings, they're all very, very close together. So most of them hold within a very solid safety standard.
Thank you. And you did say you can provide us with the report?
Yes, I will forward that. I had that from Brad Greenland, one of the assistants.
Thank you
I'll
very
forward
much.
that now.
Okay, next up, Chair recognizes Dan Goodman, representing the AAA in support of the bill, looking for 3 minutes. Welcome.
I'm sorry about that. For the record, my name is Dan Goodman, and I represent AAA of Northern New England. And I just wanted to clarify a point that I heard earlier. This bill would not require any parent to purchase a new car seat. When let's say you have a newborn, the nurse at the hospital or someone at the hospital looks at that car seat before you leave with your newborn. They would not let you leave in a forward-facing car seat. So what this bill would just have you keep your child in that existing car seat that you already own up until 2 years old or until you reach the height or weight limits of the car seat. Just a quick clarification. That's the way at least I see it. And I just want to quickly go over a couple of the studies that, as has been mentioned, there was a study report completed in 2022 and a couple of studies that they looked at that really show that staying in a rear-facing car seat is the best thing to do for our children. In 2007, a University of Virginia study found that children were 75% likely to suffer severe or fatal injuries in a crash if they are facing in the rear. In 2017, restraint use saved the lives of 325 children aged 4 years and younger. A 2013 NHTSA analysis found that correct child seat safety usage was linked with a fatality reduction of 57% among children 1 to 3 years old. There's also a belief that parents are properly restraining their children. And a AAA study in 2021 found that 52 to 84% of car seats that was inspected by child passenger safety technicians around the country were installed incorrectly, with the number one reason for the installation incorrect was the wrong car seat. For instance, putting a child in a forward-facing car seat too early. A 2018 Ohio State University Medical Center study looked at rear-facing car seats and rear impact crashes. They found that rear-facing seats are able to support the child's head, neck, and spine and keep those vulnerable body regions well protected. These regions are especially vulnerable in newborns, younger children whose spine and vertebrae haven't fused and fully developed. I think, with our existing law, 7 years old or 57 pounds, this bill would provide the education that parents, I think, really need. As has been mentioned in many of the bills here, traffic safety bills, it's a three-legged stool: education, enforcement, engineering. They have designed, the car seat designs have improved over the years, so we've engineering. There's CPS technicians and the Department of Safety, Office of Highway Safety are providing a lot of education throughout the state. But what's lacking is that enforcement piece, and this bill would close that loop. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. I do have one question. To clarify something I thought I heard you say, did you say hospitals would hold children hostage until they have a rear-facing child seat installed in the car?
Thank you for that question, Chairman. It sometimes feels like they held you hostage. They do not hold you hostage, but they would, I actually don't know exactly what they would do, but my understanding is they would not. When I first, with my first child, who's 4 now, they were installed incorrectly, and they reinstalled it, put them properly fastened, and I was told that if I had the wrong car seat, they would help me get a better car seat. If that helps answer your question.
No, but that's okay. And further questions from the committee? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to figure out how many parents this may affect that don't do this now. I mean, are we, especially in New Hampshire, I mean, is it 1, 2, 50, 500? I mean, it just seems like the number is so tiny. I'm not sure this is necessary. Do you have any data or anything on that?
Thank you for the question. I don't have any data. I'm not sure if the CPS technicians around the state compile data on incorrect car seats, what they see. And a lot of that data that we're seeing from the CPS techs, which is when we see like I stated, 52 to 84% of car seats are installed incorrectly. That's only really from a small percentage of parents or grandparents who are bringing their cars into these check stations at fire stations and police departments. So unfortunately, I don't have that data.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have nobody else signed up to speak on Senate Bill 118, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Next one is scheduled for 10:30, so we have a few minutes to regroup. Thank you. Okay, being 10:32, I'm opening up the public hearing on Senate Bill 187 relative to driver's licenses for certain visa holders. Prime sponsor is not available, so Representative Sykes has been kind enough to introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the Transportation Committee. For the record, I am Representative George Sykes, Grafton 13, Ward 2 in Lebanon, New Hampshire. So I want to call to your attention the fact that, oh, and here he is. You want to introduce your bill, Senator?
Yeah, I thought it wasn't 10:30, I'm sorry.
Well, we're efficient. There we go. I'll step aside. Perfect.
Despite what he said, here's the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies for being a couple minutes late. I'm Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 187 relative to driver's licenses for certain visa holders. Now, I suppose it's deja vu that I'm here again before you, second time today, and it's also maybe a little bit of deja vu for some of you on this issue and this bill, because the committee, I thank them for their good work last year on a version of this. We didn't quite get there, but having benefited from what this committee suggested there were issues need to be addressed, we worked over it on this, and I'm very grateful to Director Rasho and Jeff Oberdenka, who have kind of, I think, come up with some pretty good language that protects New Hampshire's interests and yet helps our farmers out with this issue of the H-2A visa. So let me just describe a little bit why this is helpful for us and can solve some problems for the state. These H-2A workers are agricultural workers who come under a special visa to work on our farms. You know, we've got about 240 to 250 farms. Not all of them need this labor, but several of the larger operations do, as we will hear. And these folks have been coming for decades and decades. And a lot of times, a particular farm, there's a relationship with a group of workers. They come up. These visas are good for a 10-month stay, which is, you know, harvest season, planting and harvest season plus, and they're going to need to be able to be on the roads. Now, it has been in others the states around us that there's a recognition of certain kinds of international driver's license or driver's licenses for other countries. And because we don't have that explicitly in state statute, a couple of things are happening. They're here for the 60 days, and it kicks in under 263.35 that they're supposed to get a state license if they're here for more than 60 days. Well, they don't want that. It's kind of because it'd be kind of inappropriate for them. They got their license. They're not wanting to be residents of New Hampshire. But since we don't recognize these other forms of licensing, then they're kind of stuck. The second thing is that the feds have been coming in the Department of Labor, and they've been wanting to fine these farms because the state doesn't have this program. And this is a problem for our farmers. And again, all the states around us, they do something like this, and there's no issues about the Department of Labor coming in and trying to, I think, harass our farmers, although I know I shouldn't use that word, but that's the way it seems to me. So the bottom line here is, how do we enable these particular visa holders to come and do their agricultural work and be able to operate their farm equipment or to drive on a valid license from another jurisdiction while they are here, while we make sure that we protect our roads and New Hampshire citizens by knowing that these drivers have good safety records and have a license that ensures that they've had at least as rigorous training and requirements for getting that license as we'd have for a New Hampshire resident. So that's the background to this, and again, thanks to the division on the language that we come up here about reciprocity agreements for H-2A workers. Now, we have existing reciprocity arrangements on licensing with some nations. We're working on one with we passed some legislation, did something like this for Taiwan in terms of reciprocity agreements. So we do these kinds of things, and this is a particular way to address these kinds of workers. So they cannot operate a motor vehicle in New Hampshire unless, starting lines 5 and 6. And here are the criteria that we came up with. He or she holds a valid driver's license or permit to operate a motor vehicle issued by another U.S. jurisdiction. So that could be another state where they have been working, and we recognize licenses issued by other states. Or, starting on line 9, he or she holds a valid driver's license or permit to operate a motor vehicle from a jurisdiction outside the United States. 18, lawfully present in the country under this visa program, is present for less than a year. Well, that's the 10 months of the program. I mean, you can get an H-2A visa for up to 3 years, but it's basically a 10-month visa that they're operating under. So it's been here less than a year. He or she possesses an international driver permit if their home country license is not in English. So that's important. If an officer pulls someone over and wants to determine if it's a valid license, they need to be able to have something that's in English. And if their home country license is not, then the international driver's permit, which is something they can get, will be. Now, let me just mention a little more in the background on this and the work that was done with these foreign jurisdictions. A lot of these workers are from Jamaica. They have long provided agricultural workers to the Northeast, and as I said, there are some decades of relationships with these workers who come up to the same farms. And we had a consular official from Jamaica come up to the Senate hearing who very thoroughly described to us the licensing requirements, which are actually stricter than New Hampshire ones, and also the assurance that we have that if someone has committed a violation down there, that we're going to know about it. And if somebody commits a violation up here, that then they're going to be subject to driver's loss in their home country. So that was very helpful to hear. But it's not just Jamaica. We've had some from South Africa. We've had some from Mexico, sprinkling from other countries potentially. So that's the kind of workforce that we're dealing with. This is something the Farm Bureau supports. We've had a lot, the farmers come down to support, and I hope, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that you see how we benefited from your deliberations last time and came up with a bill that addresses the questions that you raised. So thank you, and I know I'm really grateful that Director Macho is here, who can talk a lot of the ins and outs about how we do reciprocity and how this will work for the division. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Senator. I was going to mention to the committee, we do have Director Marasco signed up to speak. So in terms of how the law actually functions right now, questions about those would be best served by him. That being said, any questions for Senator Waters? Seeing, Representative Hill.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
morning.
Senator. Good morning. You are anticipating with this legislation that there would be a formal agreement between New Hampshire and their home state, so Jamaica and Mexico and the other countries that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Is
thanks
that,
for that.
I
Thanks
didn't
for-
see that
thanks.
spelled out in the legislation, so that's what I
Yeah,
was.
thanks for that question. There is an option there. I mean, what's nice about this bill is that it takes care of a variety of jurisdictions. And we don't want to leave our farmers hanging if it just happens that that there's a jurisdiction with which we have not gone through the, kind of lengthy process of working through reciprocity. But as we're doing with Taiwan right now, we can do that. We can do that process of one country. I think though, for the particular purpose of H-2A visas, which are this particular form of visa for agricultural workers, that this approach is probably much more efficient and a little more comprehensive than the process of doing a reciprocity agreement with every single country from which someone might arrive. And a reciprocity agreement is going to probably cover a lot more than just these visas. So I think this is a good way to go, but that your question, you can, I think, ask Director Marasco, because we've had some conversation about that too.
Any other questions? I have one last one.
Yeah.
Line 7 brings up a question. He or she holds a valid license to permit and operate a motor vehicle issued by another U.S. jurisdiction. So question is New Hampshire the only state that does not have jurisdiction or recognize Jamaican licenses, or are there others?
Thank you. My understanding from working over this last couple of years is that we are the only one of our surrounding states that doesn't take care of this. So, a worker who's picking apples or something up in Maine and may have under Maine has gotten a recognition, might come over to work in New Hampshire. So, but we're the only state that doesn't, take care of this, because it's not just the workers, right? It's the farmers who are getting the Department of Labor coming in and fining them some substantial amounts because we don't have this in statute. So that's the other part of this that this will take care of.
Yeah. I'll leave that one alone, because it looks like a U.S. jurisdiction would be a state
Yeah.
recognized. So that means they would have a main,
territory,
that would
or
have a main,
territory.
they
Could
would have
be
a main
Puerto Rico
license.
or-
Right,
yeah.
right. Did you, in your research on this is something I did not look into, really get into the weeds why the Department of Labor is even going into this mode? You mentioned harassment, but is there more to it than that?
I think we'll hear from the farmer who's been affected.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, Chair recognizes Representative Ming, representing Hollis, Hillsborough 35, in support of the bill, looking for a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Transportation Committee members. My name is Ben Ming. I'm a state representative for the town of Hollis. I'm speaking today in support of SB 187. I'm here both at the request of Trevor Hardy of the Brookdale Fruit Farm, who is one of my constituents, and as a resident of the farming community that is Hollis. Many of our farms have employed temporary agricultural workers from Jamaica, with Brookdale itself employing dozens under the federal H-2A program. They've done so for nearly 4 decades. And over that period of time, complaints or violations involving H-2A workers driving work vehicles in Hollis have been minimal, if not completely non-existent. Farming is important to Hollis because agriculture has an outsized impact on the way it feels to live there. As a member of my town's planning board, I get to hear what people care about the most as it relates to how land is used. And it's usually one of two things: the impact on schools or the effect on rural character. Although rural character has a very specific definition in our zoning code, most people use it to express that they like living in a small, tight-knit community connected to agriculture and nature. Multi-generational families like the Hardys could tell you that much has changed in Hollis since they first set down their roots, but we still have easy access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and there are still scenic, wide-open fields, all thanks to our local farms. The success of our farms drives what it means for many of our residents to enjoy living in our community. Our farms are that important. Therefore, our farms' seasonal workers are that important. They're a part of our community, which is why I'm here in support of SB 187 and why I ask that you please support a motion of ought to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thanks again.
Thank you.
Hold up on that one. Next up, the chair recognizes Stephen Wood, representing himself in support of the bill, looking for 3 minutes. Welcome.
There we go. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this. I am Stephen Wood. I, with my family, own and operate Poverty Lane Orchards and Farnham Hill Ciders in Lebanon. And I've been working at the same farm since 1965 for my sins. We've been employing Jamaican folks through the H-2A program for over 30 years. And like I think all of my colleagues in New Hampshire, I was until 2021 unaware of the existence of the law that this bill addresses. And we have one gentleman who's got a valid Jamaican license and also has an international driver's permit, the need for which would be obviated by this bill. But then a couple of others who just have Jamaican licenses. They've never been stopped by the police. Their driver's record in that entire time is 100% clean. The only thing I ever heard from the police was that the chief of the Plainfield Police called when one of my gentlemen ran the crew van into a deer, and he called to say, please do not blame this person for this accident. He did a brilliant job of trying to avoid it. The police waved to our guys. Fortunately, I don't think the police were aware of this law either. I became aware of it kind of grimly in 2021 when we got a U.S. Department of Labor audit, which are irregular, and they're sort of like tidal waves with an attitude. And for failure to comply fully with state law, we were fined $1,250 because our Jamaican gentleman only had Jamaican licenses and/or international permits. That's when I learned that there was even a law on the books, the one that this law, thank goodness, addresses. Our farms are spread around. We need to be able to get workers from one place to another. Not all of the Jamaican gentlemen who work for us drive, the ones with licenses. And some of them don't really want to drive anyway, or, even if they have licenses. But we need them to be able to drive. We've got farms in Lebanon and a farm in Plainfield. Last year, we tried very hard to get one of them a New Hampshire license when this bill failed last year. And we were required at the last minute to come up with a driving record for the DMV, and it took us 6 weeks to get the driving record from Jamaica. So I guess we were civil disobedience last year, but this is an important bill, and it addresses what I hope is just something resembling an oversight in current law. My record, the record of our farm Jamaican drivers, is not unusual. That is to say, I'm not aware of any moving violations at any of my colleagues' farms ever with Jamaican licensed drivers. Meanwhile, New Hampshire is unusual in the surrounding states. We're the only one that has this requirement. So this bill, which I hope you will support, will bring us into consistency with our colleagues elsewhere around here. And if we need to, I guess we'll get our gentlemen New Hampshire driver's licenses, but I, for the life of me, can't understand why that should be necessary. My New Hampshire license has never been challenged in any country I've ever been to in the world, including a lot of them that don't speak English. Rented cars, driven, gotten pulled over for moving violations and allowed to continue on my way. So I think we should show Jamaica the same courtesy that we are ourselves shown by other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee? Representative Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wood, how are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. How are you?
I'm well. One piece that I want a little clarity on, you made a big effort to get a driver's record for your employee from Jamaica. And you pointed out that you pointed out the time that it took, but I didn't hear you mention the cost for you as a farmer
thank
as well.
Thank you. Generous question. It cost a few $100s in the end because we were required to send all the paperwork over land, not by email, to the Jamaican private agency, which itself charged. They charged a couple $100. They wanted to send express mail, and it got to Miami the next day, but it took 4 weeks to get to the hands of the people in Jamaica. And then there was some other costs associated, but it was several $100s to fail. Now, the thing is, in truth, we were trying to do a last minute job. So if I knew this year what I did not know last year, which is that they had to have a driver's license, but also that they needed to get their driving record, then I would get a hold of the gentleman before they come here and say, please bring your driving record. But it was ironic because when the man's driving record arrived, it was spotless forever. He'd never had a moving violation in Jamaica either. But yeah, it was just another couple $100. It's like a tip on the DOL thing. Thank you, sir, for the question.
Any other questions? Just one, I want to confirm, you said that the Department of Labor charged you or fined you $1,250 in 2021?
2021, sir, yes.
Thank you.
Yep. We talked it down a little bit. I can't remember what we wound up paying, but the
No, it's-
original fine was.
It's the timing of everything that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
with no other questions, thank you very much. Oop, Representative Rich.
I was just wondering how expensive is it to get an international driving permit that is mentioned on here? Is that,
I don't think it costs anything in Jamaica, but
I
I
didn't
don't
know
know.
if that
I'm
would be
sure
a
it
help or
varies.
not.
Yeah, I don't. This guy just has it. He's always gotten it. Nobody's ever required that he have it. He just. But I don't think he'd be doing it if it cost him a lot of money. He's never mentioned it.
Right. That could be a question for the director and representatives. So seeing no other questions, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your service, folks.
Next up, Chair recognizes Pooh Sprague, representing himself. He's a farmer in support of the bill, looking for hopefully less than 5 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'll say at the beginning, I'm hearing impaired, so we get the questions point.
Can I just get you to
bear with
repeat?
me.
Can I get you to repeat your name, please, for our clerk?
I'm sorry?
Can I get you to repeat your name for our clerk, please?
That'd be great. Yeah, if you have questions for me written.
No,
would be-
no,
I'm
maybe
sorry.
this is too far away. Can I just have you state your name for our clerk, please?
Do you want your name and where you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My name's Pooh Sprague. I'm from Plainfield, New Hampshire. In the interest of brevity, I'll just read the statement to start with and save for comment at the end. Our family has owned and operated Edgewater Farm in Plainfield, New Hampshire since 1974. Edgewater Farm produces vegetables, small fruit, ornamentals, and in addition to our family members and local workers, we have hired H2A Jamaican workers for 28 years. And one of the guys that's been with us started 28 years ago with us, and he worked on another Upper Valley farm prior to that. Our farm fields, as well as our housing for the 7 Jamaican H2A guys, farmers from whom we contract through the state and federal government, are spread out between Cornish and Plainfield, as are our fields. We rely on the Jamaican workers who hold valid international driver's licenses to be able to drive on the New Hampshire roads to these fields and their housing. We need these workers to be allowed to drive our vehicles so that we can continue to run our farm business the way we do. We urgently hope that you pass Senate Bill 187 as presented. Thank you for your attention. I don't think there's any new news here in that letter to you folks. I would certainly take the measure of the few farmers in the room today as not an indication of the importance of this bill to all of us. We started out 50 years ago, an ad in the paper would get you high school kids. And we can get plenty of people on our farm to do retail and work in the greenhouses for 15, 20 hours a week. And quite honestly, we have an aged workforce. Most of these people are retired. But we can't get anybody to even interview for stoop labor. And that's what we do. Strawberries, apple, we don't do apples, but strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, squash, carrots. It's all hands and knees labor. Can't get college kids, you can't get high school kids, you need these guys. And so the bottom line is, you go through a lot of hoops to get them here from Jamaica in the very first place. It's not a simple process. I don't call up Jasper and say, hey, call Roy and Garnet and why don't you guys come up next week? It's a long, involved process with the Department of Labor to get these guys up at some expense. They're not cheap labor either, as you may well know. So
this additional New Hampshire license is another added burden. It's hard. These people come up, they take one day off, and they're all working on a farm. So if you can relieve this burden from us, or prevent it from going out for that, it would really be a great help to the farming community. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, Chair recognizes Mike Willett, Medillac ATV Club, in support of the bill, looking for a couple of minutes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Wrong bill?
Wrong bill, 56.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My mistake. You did have it on the card, right? You just got wrong. It was put in the wrong pile. Let me make sure of this one. Wallace Titcomb, is that for 188 or this bill?
188.
Next bill. Okay. Chair recognizes Robert Johnson, New Hampshire Farm Bureau, in support of the bill. Looking for a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Rob Johnson, representing the New Hampshire Farm Bureau as the Federation's policy director. And we are in strong support of Senate Bill 187, a bill enabling H-2A visa workers employed and living on New Hampshire farms to drive in New Hampshire on their home country license. Senator Waters initially filed this legislation last session, Senate Bill 308, as many of you are aware, at the request of Farm Bureau. The reason we approached Senator Waters is that he served on the 2019 commission to study the licensing of drivers from foreign countries. And this was a request made of him just at the filing deadline. Representative Sykes chaired that commission. And as you're aware, Mr. Chair, this committee has recommended this Senate Bill 308 for future legislation. The H-2A Agricultural Guest Worker Program is a temporary visa program enabling farms to hire seasonal agricultural workers for a period of up to 1 year before they must return home. Most of the workers are here 4 to 8 months, sometimes up to 10. And as was previously said, it is an expensive program. These farmers are required to pay by federal law an adverse effect wage rate. In New Hampshire, it is set at $16.95 an hour currently. They pay to transport them to New Hampshire, and they pay to house them. And the reason they do this, as was previously said, these are professional farm workers that they cannot get here. These people are vetted by 3 federal agencies in one form or another: Homeland Security, Citizenship and Immigration, the State Department. As far as numbers go in New Hampshire, we're talking about upwards of 50 farms are now utilizing at least one H-2A worker, over 300 employees statewide total. As was also said previously, a majority of these workers in New Hampshire are Jamaican. That's different from much of the rest of the country, where of the total H-2A worker pool in this country is 97-98% Spanish or Mexican. In New Hampshire, we're 3/4 Jamaican. We do have some, as was also previously said, that are Spanish, Mexican, South Africa, for example. I know in Coos County that some of the Christmas tree growers utilize South African workers. And and I also want to point out that this isn't an issue for the Mexican workers because of our free trade agreement that we have with that country. That's why this is kind of a niche with the Mexican, with the Jamaican, South African, and other countries. And again, I want to stress, these are professional workers. These gentlemen, these farmers have long-term relationships with these folks. And I can tell you with some of they go down to Jamaica on vacation with them. Many of these workers have come up here for years, the same workers year after year. And when they're done, they have their friends or they have their children that are working for them. The bill removes an unnecessary burden on New Hampshire farm businesses that is only experienced here in New Hampshire. in our border states, Maine, Massachusetts, and Vermont, individuals are permitted to drive on their foreign issue license for up to 1 year. So just think about this now. H-2A workers are coming into Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts, and they are driving into New Hampshire and back, and they're fine. We have people here working on New Hampshire farms who cannot drive in the state they're working in. And where it would be a benefit to our growers is for the most part, is when these workers are traveling from field to field. These guys aren't going out and vacationing and looking at the sites. They're working as 16 hours a day so they can send money back to their families. They're here to work. And as I said, in New Hampshire, to be clear, current law requires anyone in the state beyond 60 days and wishing to drive hold a valid New Hampshire's license or a license from another jurisdiction recognized by the state. This is also not an issue for H-2A employers in the other New England states. It's not an issue in New York. It's not an issue in New Jersey. It's not an issue in Pennsylvania. Again, it's only here in New Hampshire. This is a removing a burden on New Hampshire businesses. These happen to be farm businesses. As was alluded to earlier, the catalyst for the bill comes from an incident we've had on 2 New Hampshire farms where, again, they were fined by the Department of Labor. And it was a paper audit. The problem was they were conducting an audit. It wasn't where these workers were driving and then nabbed by police. It was just a paper audit. The truth of it is, the auditors said to the workers, have you been driving those vehicles? And they said yes, because these guys told them to be honest. And they were, which is the way it should be. Again, and in the interest of time, we urge you to, we've been at this for 4 years now, to recommend this legislation as ought to pass. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Other than I will try to answer the question that was asked earlier regarding the cost of an international driving permit. It's issued by the sending nation. So if it's a Jamaican, it would be Jamaica. And if I remember, it was either $25 or $40. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee. Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you just stated that it's taken up to 4 years for this legislation to hopefully at one day ought to pass. Is that what you're saying?
We have been working on it for 4 years, is what I'm saying. It was introduced initially at Senate Bill 308, and then now on our side of it, it's been 4 years. We have met numerous times with motor vehicle. We attempted to try to solve it with as Mr. Wood explained earlier, and it was costly and a time. He didn't talk about the time it cost him to do all this, or the day that he had to pay his worker he would have to try to pay his worker to go get his license.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Hill.
Mr. Chair, I do have handouts for the committee, and one I do want to point to you is a written letter from the Jamaican consulate that answered some questions that this committee had previously and that the Senate committees have had, but I'll get those to you.
Yes, anything you've got that'll be helpful.
Thank you.
By all means. Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. Did I understand you correctly in saying that in New Hampshire, we're currently 75% Jamaican and 25% Spanish or Mexican?
Approximately, yes. You'll see in one of the handouts that the Jamaican consulate estimates that Jamaicans on approximately 40 or so farms and 240 workers, I think it says. Okay. I think in the state, we're probably in the mid 300s, and we're approaching 50. It's probably, approaching 50, so it's high 40s.
Okay. What I'm trying to clarify is I think I heard you say that the free trade agreement covers those that are here that come from Mexico or?
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. It covers the driver's licensing piece. There's a reciprocity in the licensing, so they don't need a New Hampshire license. We recognize their Mexican license Mexican license in state.
And they follow up, please. And they're recognizing that license without having any agreement with that other country other than the free trade agreement?
That's my understanding. Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But that's with Canada because of the nation agreement. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director Marasco and Mike Mercier, come on down. Representing the DMV, informational testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you so much for having us this morning. My name is John Marasco. I'm the Director of the Division of Motor Vehicles, and I'm here today with Michael Mercier, who is the administrator overseeing the Driver Licensing Bureau within the agency, and Assistant Supervisor Ray Fernandez, who is seated here as well. And Ray was kind enough to come over. Ray has 17 to 18 years of experience regarding non-U.S. transactions at the DMV, which are more complex and deal with different forms of identification. So Ray is here should you have any additional questions in that area. I'd like to start off by saying that at the DMV, and I think statewide, we all care about the farming community. We want the farming industry to do well, and the DMV is always focused on getting to yes and trying to find those areas where we can partner with industry and other stakeholders to make sure that we're doing the best that we can, that we're not an obstacle, and that we're a facilitator in areas where we can be. We do have regular community outreach meetings once a month. Some members of the committee here attend those meetings, and we make changes. When there are opportunities to make changes to rule, to law, to internal practice, we do that. We do it because it's the right thing to do, and there might be something that's changed over the years that we need to take a look at. And so that's always going to be our commitment, not just to the farming industry, but every industry. So that being said, at the end of last session, the bill that's been spoken about, I believe SB 308, that was referenced by Rob Johnson, we recognized, okay, you have a lot of workers that are coming in from Jamaica. It's the first time that this issue has been highlighted, that I became aware of it. And so we wanted to figure out, well, what can we do to help, try to find a way to help. So what we did first was we actually met with Senator Waters on that bill. Took a look at it, and actually with Representative Walsh and I believe Representative Hill, we actually got together with Senator Waters, some supervisors from the DMV, and we took a look at the language from that bill from that last session. That being said, I listened to the testimony from Senator Waters, as far as crafting the bill, and I did have to pull out my phone, and I wanted to go back and look at my email, and I did find an email here that is back from April 21st of last year, and it actually is from Senator Waters, and it is to Chairman Walsh and to me, and it has an amendment attached to it, SB 308 Amendment 42122. And the email says, Dear Tom and John, here is the amendment with the revision to 263-35 that John and staff developed, and the revision to the current bill language we developed at the meeting. I think there is much improvement. This is a much improved bill, and I'm glad that we were able to include the needed change in 263-35. Tom can send it to OLS unless there are any further thoughts, David. So I opened up what that amendment was, because this whole conversation, going back to the last session, was really focused on reciprocity. I've been at the DMV a little bit over a year. There's RSAs such as 263-39A, license for aliens temporarily residing in New Hampshire. That governs how visa holders are able to get a license here in New Hampshire. But there are exceptions to that, and the exception would be you could enter into a reciprocal agreement with a country. And so we're actually, before I came into this position, there's one that's already started down that track with Taiwan. And I met with the representatives from Taiwan, and I'm working with Department of Safety Legal on that reciprocity agreement. So the focus for Jamaica was always reciprocity. Because actually at that meeting that Representative Walsh and Hill and Senator Waters and myself and Jeff Oberdank and Kelly Brudniak were at, I actually pulled it up on my phone to look at what are the licensing standards in Jamaica. And what I was pleasantly surprised by was that They appear to be much more stringent than they are here in New Hampshire. 21 years of age, medical checkup, a more robust driving portion of the exam. So when you look at something like that, I mean, certainly the reciprocity agreement is something you could look at and say, you know, I think we could make this work. You know, we could take a look at how to transfer records back and forth, you know, how to surrender a license back and forth and try to get to yes on this issue. But going back to that attachment that Senator Waters had sent to us, and this is for Section 26335, it says in here, or a country that has current driver reciprocity agreement with the Department of Safety. And then it goes down to say, in a different section, from a foreign jurisdiction that has a reciprocal agreement with the state of New Hampshire. So I just wanted to give you that background because that was always the focus. That was always the focus. The focus was trying to help the Jamaican workers that are coming to New Hampshire, which I learned today are 75% of the guest workers coming in and helping the farming industry. That was always the focus, but the reciprocity agreement was seen as the vehicle to get that over the finish line. And so what did we do after the last session? We had that meeting. We worked on some language regarding a reciprocity agreement. We also went and met with the farming community. Rob was kind enough to have us over to one of his regular meetings over on Route 106. We went there, we talked to people. We're invested in trying to help where we can. The other thing is Supervisor Jeff Oberdank from the DMV had worked along with Supervisor Kelly Brudniak to set up opportunities where we could bring DMV services closer to where these farms are. Because that was one of the things we heard was that the transportation, taking the workers off the farm for the day to go to Concord was a heavy lift and it cost a full day's worth of work. So what do we do there? Well, we tried to establish transactions in Nashua, which was an area that was requested, as well as Newport. You know, and it's no fault of anybody, but Supervisor Oberdank told me after we tried to establish these opportunities for people to come in and do that work closer to the farms, nobody came in. That being said, I have good news, and the good news is that in the fall we should be receiving a DMV mobile vehicle. It's already been ordered, and with that, we can go closer to a lot of different constituents around the state and do DMV transactions right out of that vehicle. Is that something that, and we talked about it at the end of last session, that we would put front and center for the farming community? The answer is we would. I also want to talk a little bit about my Senate testimony on this current bill. You know, it was, I received this document this morning, and I just want to be clear with the committee. We did offer informational testimony before the Senate committee, before it got to this point on this bill. And, you know, it was mentioned at one point that, you know, that I supported this bill, and I wanted the actual notes from that testimony. This testimony would have been before the Senate Transportation Committee back on January 31st of this year. But it should be noted that the first bullet under Director Marasco, Director at New Hampshire DMV, first bullet says, Director Marasco said he opposed the bill on technical terms. However, now that there is a point of contact for Jamaica, who was there that day that I offered the testimony, and I had not met before, there can be discussions for license reciprocity, which we were absolutely thrilled about, and that's always been the focus. And now we have a point of contact, and we want to help the Jamaican workers and the farming industry here in New Hampshire. And that's going to be our commitment going forward. That being said, this current bill that you have before you, some issues that we've identified with the bill, and by the way, I did speak with Senator Waters about this. I called him last night. He knows what, you know, what I'm testifying to in these areas. It does define different statuses, if you will, of visa holders. So if you're a visa holder coming here to do contract work, you still have to be beholden to RSA 26339A and go through the DMV and get a New Hampshire license. If you're an international student and you're here to study, you still are beholden to 26339A. But what we're saying is with the H-2A visa that you are not beholden to 26339A. And that creates a discrepancy as far as how those processes are going to be enforced. And not only that, it does create some challenges for the DMV. The other thing is when you talk about records, so with these reciprocity agreements, like with the one from Taiwan, we've met with the Taipei Economic and Cultural Center. They don't have an embassy or a consulate in Boston, but that is the representative for Taiwan, at least in this area. And we talked about, now granted that's with licensing, but we talked about how a license would be surrendered, here or in Taipei. We talked about how records would be updated for driving infractions, both here and in Taiwan. We talked about what the reciprocity agreement would really get you. And at the end of the day, it would waive the road test, but you'd still have to do the eye test and the knowledge test. So even with the reciprocity agreement, it's not a open green light to basically operate on a Taiwanese license here in New Hampshire. It doesn't provide for that. This bill actually does, though. This bill would allow anybody from any country around the world to come here to New Hampshire on their home license, along with, if necessary for translation, an international driver's license, and to drive on Interstate 93, 89, 95 for up to a year. And yet we wouldn't know if that person is suspended in their home country. We wouldn't know if they've committed negligent homicide with a motor vehicle in their home country. We won't know. We won't know that. And so even these reciprocity agreements aren't just an open invitation to utilize your current license and come here. There's still a process, and it's still about, in the end, getting a New Hampshire license. Like I said, with Jamaica, we had a pretty good idea what the driving standards are there to get a license, and they're very attractive, and I think that that's why we can work with Jamaica and the consulate there, and to try to help the 75% of workers that are coming in. But I can't necessarily say that with every country around the world, because the licensing standards are going to be different everywhere you go. And we want to make sure that if we're going to allow somebody to drive on the roadway for a prolonged period of time through New Hampshire law, you want to make sure on the public safety front that you know who you're allowing to do that based on the credential that they hold. And I think that to open that up globally without having that information is a public safety issue. I think that covers the testimony that I have. I'll turn it over to Mike Marcy or any additional information, Mike?
Yeah, I would just want to add in there, even though we may have 75% Jamaican workers here, we're opening up to Jamaicans, but there are other Spanish individuals here that could be from Guatemala, Mexico, and right now I don't believe, through the testimony that we've heard earlier, that we don't have a reciprocity agreement with Guatemala. We don't have one with Mexico. So through the free trade agreement, they're not getting their license here on the free trade agreement.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee? I'll start from the end. Representative Jones, question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for coming. This bill is all about the H-2A farm workers, but there are also other industries that bring in internationals, especially the summer resort industry and the ski industry in the winter. They bring in people from Colombia and South Africa and many other places, and Jamaica. Would they fall under this bill also? Would this pertain to them?
No, it wouldn't. That would be an H-2B visa that they're under.
Further questions? Representative Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. Thank you. We've heard testimony that other New England states have a reciprocity agreement, and New Hampshire is the only one without that. Do you know how their plan, other states' plan works, and could we adapt some of those positive attributes to our plan so that we can help these farms?
Thank you, Representative, for the question. I do know that other states, and I've learned this through the work for the reciprocal agreement with Taiwan, that other states around, not only New England, but around the country, do have these reciprocal agreements that they set up with specific countries where they are aware of what those licensing standards are. And I've seen them. I've seen them from other countries as they relate to Taiwan. As far as other opportunities beyond the reciprocal agreement and what's going on in New England states, I'm not familiar with that offhand, but I'd turn it over to Mike and Ray for anything. No.
And I'm not familiar with the other states. I just know that with a reciprocal agreement, we can exchange license for license from their home country to ours. And it would require a reciprocal agreement through the consulates in order to get that program going.
We could do some research into that, Representative, and get that back to you.
Thank you. I'd be very interested to see how the other states are handling this, or specifically the concerns that you have and how are they being handled.
Absolutely. We can look into that.
Yeah, thank you. It actually takes one of my questions as well, just to see what they're doing, because they may not have an agreement. They could have just passed a law like this. So, any other questions? I'll come down the row. Representative C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I was just wondering if you mentioned HB2 type visa. Are there other types of visas that might apply or be similar to something that would fit in the context of this bill?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's many types. There's F1 visas, there's H2B visas, there's J1, there's many visas. This particular one, from what I get, it's just to be with agriculture. So I don't know if those other visas would fall into this category. But there are dozens and dozens of different visas.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Marasco, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you today?
I'm good. It's great to see you.
I have some difficult questions for you. I apologize in advance, but I feel that these questions have to be asked. So my first, and there'll be a couple follow-ups if you'll indulge with me, Mr. Chairman, please. First question is, can you tell me what countries have reciprocity agreements currently with New Hampshire?
So I'm told right now, sir, it's Canada and France. I have not seen the reciprocal agreement with France. I've asked and nobody can seem to put their hands on it, but I'm told that those are the only two countries at this time, and Taiwan being in the works. But those are the only two we currently have it with.
And do you have any follow-up, please? Do you remember or do you know when was the last time a country actually received a reciprocal agreement from New Hampshire?
I don't know.
I'm also aware that the reciprocity agreement with France is one of those out there, but nobody knows how it happened. How long have you been working at the reciprocity agreement for Taiwan? I mean, I know the answer, but I'd like the committee to hear the answer.
That's a fair question. That was actually started before I came in. That was agreed upon before I began back in March of last year. And so it's still with Department of Safety Legal, worked with Attorney Karen Schlitzer, met with the Taipei Economic and Cultural representatives. That was probably about 4 months ago, maybe 5 months ago. On the priority list, with all of the things that go to Department of Safety Legal, we don't have our own DMV attorney. We used to. I would certainly love to have that opportunity again. That
So
being said,
for clarity's sake, though, Director, it's been years.
I can tell you that it's been all of my tenure
Yeah.
that it's still swirling around.
Well, I'm certain that it's been years. Okay. Fair enough. You can see the line of questioning. I appreciate the DMV's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Sykes. Representative Gorski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director, for taking my question. If I can understand you correctly, we're still working on the reciprocity with Jamaica. We're not?
No, we haven't even started it, sir.
Haven't even started?
No, because it was never agreed upon that was. We've never gotten to a point where everybody's come to the table and said that's exactly what we want to do. It was something after the Senate hearing where we had a bona fide representative from the consulate that was there. But then this bill in its current state passed Senate Transportation, so we've never circled back around on trying to identify a reciprocity agreement.
Okay, follow up.
Yeah, follow up.
if it gets started, how long do these typically take to complete?
It's a great question. So we were just talking about it in the back of the room. There are so many complex and different responsibilities of the DMV, and I can tell you that every position in the DMV, roughly 240 employees, 208 full-time, with a handful of openings full-time right now. Everybody's working at a high level, oftentimes multitasking. You really to do this, if we're going to start looking at reciprocity agreements across the board with other countries, you probably need a full-time position, or at the very least, a part-time position, 29 and a half hours a week, where you could have somebody just focused on that could work directly with DOS Legal, that could check up on the standards for the country, identify a point of contact, identify, like we are with Taiwan, okay, John wants to go to Taipei, I have to live there for 9 months before I can apply for a Taiwanese driver's license. But before I go, I have to go to the New Hampshire DMV. I have to ask and request for my record. I have to make sure that it's certified. And then at the end of the 9 months, when I'm in Taipei, I can go, I can present my certified record. I can also, at that time, surrender my New Hampshire driver's license to the Taiwanese authorities, and there's a mechanism for them to mail it back to Boston, and then to have them mail it back to the New Hampshire DMV. There's a lot that goes into the reciprocity agreement. It can be done, but quite frankly, there's a lot of countries that would probably be eligible for this, and in order to do that, though, you've got to have a position or two that can focus on it, because it's hard to ask employees who are constantly issuing titles, helping people at the counter, issuing registrations, dealing with financial responsibility phone calls, to all of a sudden take on this research. It's hard. So I think if we're going to make this commitment moving forward, I've got to figure out through the next budget a way to provide for this layer of employee support to do this. Thank you.
Well, before I go to Representative Hill, assuming you had the manpower, would you need a statute or a bill to create the reciprocity agreement with Taiwan, or is that something you could do under your own jurisdiction?
I'd have to check on that.
Okay.
I think the reciprocity agreements, let me check on that and
Okay.
get you an answer in writing.
Fair enough, thank you. Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that took one of my questions out of the way. Thank you, Director, for taking my questions. I'm still looking for a solution for these guys sitting right here. It doesn't sound, from what I heard from you, that this bill is that pathway, because it sounds to me, from what you were saying, you believe because of the generic nature of this and the fact that this opens it up to virtually every country, that it isn't the correct vehicle for us to do this. My question is, would it be possible to tailor this to specifically a circumstance rather than, because it sounds like we're only talking about one country, Jamaica in this case. Is it possible to tailor this so that it doesn't sour your feelings of the legislation as it relates to other countries? Can we work with this and satisfy these guys and the department?
Yeah, I think you could. I think if you made this bill focused on Jamaica, then you certainly could. You could negate the need for the reciprocity agreement. You could do it through law. The only problem with that, not problem, but only consideration with that is, now is it law for every time that we want to take a look at a country that we might want to have, might want to respect their driver's license based on their licensing credentials. The reciprocity agreement, I want to say, sir, I don't think that it's law on that. I think it is an agreement based on the standards that you can, you do have some flexibility with that. I will get you that in writing to confirm it, to make sure I'm right on that. But in speaking with DOS Legal, it sounded like that was a little bit more flexible. So either way, Representative, I guess to answer your question, either way, you could do it through this bill, you could do it through law, you can make it Jamaica focused, and you could solve it that way, or we could take a look at the reciprocity agreement and do that.
Quick follow-up?
Yeah, follow up.
Thank you. if it was focused, if we utilized this and we focused it strictly on Jamaicans, or Jamaica, would it necessarily entail, I'm not sure from this, whether we're dealing with an issued New Hampshire license or whether we're allowing them to drive on their Jamaican license.
Yeah, that's
That's just one of those areas that I think needs to be, this just seems too generic to me. I don't know if that's true from your department.
Yeah, it's a great distinction that you make there. So the rest, like I said, with Taiwan, the reciprocal agreement is still to eventually, you still have to come to the DMV and test. You still have to go through the eye exam. You still have to do the knowledge test. There still are standards and milestones that you have to meet after the research is done to identify that, oh, the licensing standards there are similar to here. The nice thing about the reciprocity agreement is it lays all that out. It lays all of it out after the research is done, and it says this is exactly what this agreement will allow for. It allows you to not have to take the road test, but these are the things that you still have to do. Whereas you'd still have to do that research if you were going to put it into the bill. But I guess you could. I guess you could do it that way as well and make it more narrow and focused on Jamaica and identify what those standards are. But I do think the agreement is a better way to probably address it, only because looking at the ones that I've seen from other states on Taiwan, it just makes it crystal clear. It's more of a memorandum of understanding and agreement than it is something that's law and in a bill, which is going to be a little bit more. I think you probably have more information in the bill than you probably need, whereas the agreement allows for that dovetailing of different aspects of how this is going to work. But that's just my thoughts off the top. I'm certainly open to conversations on this bill and how to amend it to do what an agreement would do, but I think the agreement probably would be the way to go.
Okay, any other questions on this side of the room? We are running a half an hour late, so everybody's had a shot at it. Is it super critical, or is it an answer you can get on the side? I'd like to close this hearing and move on. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be talking soon on this. With that, I apologize for being a little late. I'm going to close the public hearing on Senate Bill 187 and turn around and open up the public hearing within a minute on 188. Being 1:36, I'm going to open up the public hearing on Senate Bill 188. Relative to catalytic converters, Chair recognizes the prime sponsor, Senator Fenton.
Glad to be back. Thank you, Mr. Chair and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent District 10. I am here to introduce Senate Bill 188. This bill places a variety of record-keeping requirements on catalytic converter and scrap metal dealers and requires their cooperation with law enforcement in the event of a theft. So, what is a catalytic converter? A catalytic converter is part of your car's exhaust system that converts harmful engine exhaust pollutants into something less harmful to the environment through a chemical reaction. So why are people stealing them? They contain 3 metals that aid in the chemical reaction that makes exhaust less harmful, and those are platinum, palladium, and rhodium, and these prices of these metals have risen dramatically. As a result, one catalytic converter is worth anywhere from $150 to $1,500 and can be sawn off of a car in a matter of minutes. State Farm reported that in just the first half of 2022, it had received more than 23,000 catalytic converter theft claims nationally, and New Hampshire is no different. We are seeing dealerships, rental cars, UPS facilities being hit, as well as cars just parked on the street. This bill would help curb the theft of catalytic converters by regulating the purchase of the automobile parts by scrap metal dealers. We're going to require proof of identification and a bill of sale or other document indicating ownership from the sellers. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee? Representative Hill.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Representative.
Would the bill in any way, or do we have any assurances that someone who steals one of these couldn't just take it to a scrapyard outside of New Hampshire?
No, I mean, we can't jurisdict outside of New Hampshire, yeah.
So-
But I will say that most states around us have passed comprehensive laws dealing with catalytic converters, so the tactic here is to cut off where they can sell these catalytic converters. So are they going to steal it and now drive 3 or 4 states over? Massachusetts passed a very similar law to this, so hopefully that'll stop them as well.
That's the question. Thanks very much.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Always good to be back. Thank you, guys.
Chair recognizes, looks like Kyle Sipples from Littleton Auto Saver Group in support of the bill. Looking for 5 minutes. If you can cut it to less than that, it would be appreciated.
We have dealerships in one in New York, but mostly Vermont and New Hampshire. And 2 things I wanted to address. Number one is Vermont passed a similar law to the one that you're looking at today. And what we found is that our dealerships in Vermont, catalytic converter theft went down roughly 90%. So the bill was tremendously successful, with one exception. The dealerships we own that are right on the border of New Hampshire did not see the reduction that our dealerships further into Vermont saw. So it was clear to us where the catalytic converters were going. So we know that if the surrounding states pass laws, so Massachusetts, Vermont has similar laws, these are bulky items and they don't like to travel far with these items because it's pretty obvious what you're doing. So I just want to say, I can say from our personal experience with this type of legislation is it's extremely effective. Number 2, I think one message that really gets lost here is that roughly 50% of the catalytic converters we've had stolen from our lots are from customers who have left their vehicles to be serviced. And the shiny new cars get put on the front where the police drive by. But the other, the service customers' cars tend to be farther back. We, just this winter, we had a plow truck business, sole person with one truck. He was out of business for 3 months waiting for a catalytic converter to come in. There's so many are being stolen. You've got the supply chain issues. We've had landscapers, carpenters, people that depend on their vehicles. It is not uncommon for them to be out for 2-3 months and literally not. You can't rent a plow truck, at least not easily. So it's had a tremendous impact, not just on businesses, but consumers as well. So with that, I'll keep my comments brief.
What about a test pipe? But anyway, any questions from the committee? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. About how many are being taken or stolen?
So roughly, it depends on the dealership, but it comes in waves. But generally, somewhere in the 15 to 20 a year, and we're up in Littleton, so I would say averaging 15 to 20 a year. And you're looking at roughly $3,000 to replace these. Depends on the size of the vehicle. That's anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. And we've been eating that cost. I don't know how long we can, but.
Yeah, it has been a problem everywhere. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next up, Travis Allen, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, in support of the bill, looking for 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Walsh and committee. My name is Travis Allen. I'm a risk manager for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. My territory in my current role is the majority of Massachusetts, geographically New Hampshire and Maine. I'm here today in support of SB 188. We're no stranger to this and being a victim of this type of illicit activity. As a car rental company, we, similar to delivery services, postal services, UPS, we have a lot of cars on a lot, left unattended for weekends or overnight. And this activity is, it's really concerning to us as a business, and it's concerning to our employees as citizens as well for their personal vehicles. Since the pandemic started, the National Insurance Crime Bureau has reported an increase of 1,215% of catalytic converter theft across the U.S. As Senator Fenton had mentioned, it has there's catalytic converters have three very valuable metals in there: rhodium, palladium, and platinum. And the thieves can get into these cars with a Sawzall and underneath it and be gone in 2 to 3 minutes per car. It's very easy, and to cut this piece of the vehicle off. And we're strongly in support of this. One thing to let the committee know, similar to the previous gentleman mentioned in Vermont, Maine passed legislation similar to this last summer. Massachusetts passed legislation in January that's similar to what's in front of the committee today. In my role as a risk manager, prior to that legislation in those states being passed, we would see in Maine and New Hampshire, our Maine and New Hampshire operations, 3 to 5 occurrences on our vehicles of theft of catalytic converter per month. In Maine, I believe since in the 9 months since the legislation passed, we've only seen 2. And in Massachusetts, we've only seen 1 in the last 3 months. So it appears to be working. And I would echo the sentiments that surrounding states have all enacted. Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts, Maine, they've all passed similar legislation. And these rings, my concern would start operating up here, where the offloading of the stolen catalytic converters would be easier because it's not regulated, that we would see this activity uptick in New Hampshire if this does not pass.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thanks again.
Thank you.
Next up, Chair recognizes Wallace Titcomb, New Hampshire Catalyst Refining LLC, opposed to the bill. Says you're looking for 15 minutes, but if you could help me out, it would be appreciated.
Yes, sir. Make it brief. My name is Wallace Titcomb. I currently am a managing partner of New England Catalyst and Refining in Manchester, New Hampshire. A lot of this bill, I think, is probably already written into law. I've been cooperating with police since I've been in the business. I'm 48 years in the scrap business, and I think I'm well qualified because I pretty much can sniff out or be able to identify certain converters that are stolen. So what I do when I buy catalytic converters, I get licenses, names, addresses, all that. Everything goes on a receipt. Everybody signs a receipt. When it comes to photographs, the only time I do that is if I'm very, very convinced that the converter could be stolen. And what I do is we'll take the picture and picture of the customer's license, all that stuff. And it goes to what's called Leads Online, which any police department in the state can become a part of. I guess there's a fee to it. But once they get on Leads Online, they can see the activity that we have and the people that we're targeting or not targeting, but highlighting as possible thieves. Now, I think the big thing that the people are, I'm going off script here. The big problem is drugs, especially in the city of Manchester. And the police in Manchester are so overwhelmed with murders and stabbings, et cetera, that I don't believe they really can take the time to, to follow up on a lot of the converters. I just went to court a week and a half ago against one of my customers who had sold me stolen catalytic converters. He didn't steal them personally, but he sold them to me. Now, the record keeping is not a problem with me. The idea was when he brought them to me, I recognized the converters. I informed him that they were an often stolen converter and they were getting put aside. Now, my policy has always been if I have a little bit of an inkling, the converters get put away for 3 days. If I'm very convinced, they get put away for 7 days. 10 days is a little much. People see this in the legislation and my doors are going to come off the hinges. So that's why it's only to certain customers that I feel may have sold me stolen material. The material gets set aside all by itself for 7 days maximum. I got broken into last year saving catalytic converters. It cost me $10,000. It hurt, but I'm not crying about it because I do as much as I can to make sure these guys don't even come to me. So I had an agreement with the state police, well, certain people in the state police and the local police. If they had a suspect and they name that suspect, I mean, it's not an admission of guilt for the guy, but if they name that suspect, he wouldn't be allowed in my door. So I have no problem cooperating with the police. But one of the biggest problems I have is photographing everybody. That's overboard. If I got to put up with 4 or 5 people at my door at a time because it happens often, and I got to start taking pictures of everybody, I mean, it interferes with my business. And a lot of these people I already know. So anyway, one issue that I really have on this bill, and I've been looking extensively on this, where you want to make it a law that I have to pay by check. Now, from everything I understand, checks, debit cards, and credit cards are not considered legal tender. The US dollar currency is considered legal tender. So how you can force me to pay outside of tender, I really don't understand. I mean, you people can do whatever you want. I will do what I can to comply, but as far as pushing me on signing or writing checks, that's going to be way over it. And one caveat, not only was it the pandemic, but prices in 2020 were through the roof. They lasted up until about August or September of last year. The prices have gone down as much as 50 to 60% on these catalytic converters. So even I don't know how to put it. We call them crack babies. The people that are on drugs, they're getting discouraged because the converters are still not worth anything.
All right, let's
Stop paying their drug app.
Yeah, we'll stick with the bill.
That's fine.
at hand.
That's fine.
Anything else, sir?
No, that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Does
Yes,
anybody
sir.
have any questions? I did have one. How many people in New Hampshire do your type of recycling?
Oh, I don't even know. I wouldn't have that.
But I mean, there's many.
Well, here's the thing.
Because the only reason I ask is you mentioned, I'm sure you're running a reputable business, and some of these
do my best.
would-be thieves won't go to you, but they've got to be going someplace. So I'm just looking to see how many other businesses do this type of work, and I can find that out.
Excuse me, here's the issue. The state of New Hampshire, I love this state. I grew up here. They've been very, very lenient for the most part. From the time I was a child, the state pretty much stays out of people's business. But the problem with this business is it's a fair weather business. So when prices go high on anything, everybody's a scrap guy. As soon as the prices collapse, you can't find them with a search warrant. These people disappear. So guys like me, I get stuff like this dropped on me. I'm not opposed to the bill, just certain sections of the bill. All right?
So thank you.
Thank you.
Next up and last to speak, Dan Bennett, New Hampshire Auto Dealers Association, in support of the bill, looking for 1 minute. Oh, that says 3.
I thought I wrote 13. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's nice to see you all again. Dan Bennett, New Hampshire Auto Dealers Association. As you know, we're a trade association for the motor vehicle business in New Hampshire, about 500 businesses all over the state. This catalytic converter theft plague has been impacting car dealers. As you heard from Mr. Sipples from the Autosaver Group, I get about weekly calls on this issue. We worked with Senator Fenton on this bill to create the language. And what we did was we copied the Massachusetts law almost identically so that folks wouldn't be not selling them in New Hampshire and just run into the scrapyard in Revere. So we wanted to make sure that there was continuity. We also looked at the other approaches that were done in Maine and Vermont, which involve etching or labeling the converters. It's a problem that's it's not a great solution because any etching can just be removed with a simple abrasive. So choking off the illegal marketplace at the point of sale was the approach to this bill. I don't want to be too repetitive and get into metals or anything like that. Another data point for you all is Carfax released a study that said there were 153,000 catalytic converter thefts in 2022 from vehicles reported through Carfax. The bill doesn't prevent the sale of legal catalytic converter sales. But what it does is it aims to create, and I heard from the previous speaker with the opposition, all it does, I heard record keeping is not a problem. All this is a record keeping bill. So it allows for legal sales through a simple record keeping process. In the Senate, there were amendments made that appeased law enforcement. That dealt with the Data Privacy Act. It appeased state police as far as who has jurisdiction over enforcement. There was also an amendment made that would help out the auto and truck recyclers who do these in massive volumes because they take in whole cars and then part them out. So there was an amendment that appeased them as well. So there is federal action on the bill. On this issue, but who knows how long that could take. We've been hearing about it for 3 years with the Federal Parts Act that involves both record keeping, enhanced penalties, but also an etching program. The etching program would start at the manufacturer when the vehicle is built. However, the average age of a vehicle in the States is 12 years. So by the time that actually made it out into the marketplace, it would be years and years away when this would have an impact. So multiple states had to just go ahead and take their own action. And that's what the proposal that you have in front of you now. And we hope that you support the bill and help us kind of, like as mentioned, choke off this illegal marketplace. So thanks, and I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to make sure that this bill, if as it is right now, if I go in and sell a catalytic converter to a scrap yard, they're going to take my picture and pay me by check. Is that correct?
They're not going to take your picture. They're going to take a picture of the catalytic converter. They're also going to take a photocopy of your driver's license.
Any other questions? And again, we did hear the previous speaker too. We won't be executing this today, so we'll look into all the angles of this. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have nobody else signed up to speak. I'm going to close the public hearing on Senate Bill 188. Now, what to do with the next one? It is 11:56. I was afraid this might happen, but we were looking pretty good for a while. Committee's choice. We could take just a couple of minute break. I need one and push through into lunch, or I can open up the public hearing and reschedule it for after lunch. How do you all feel? Keep going, keep going. Okay.
Red
All right,
Red
that's what I wanted to hear. Anybody opposed to 5 minutes?
No.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up the public hearing on Senate Bill 256, and I'm going to recess the public hearing on Senate Bill 256 until 12:05. All right, being 12:05 on the money, I'm going to open up the public hearing on Senate Bill 256, establishing a safety program for off-highway recreational vehicles. I see it's a Daley Fernet, representing Senator Ward, the prime sponsor, to introduce the bill. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Walsh and members of the committee. My name is Daley Fernet, and I am the Senate Majority Caucus Director. I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 256 FN, which would establish both a lifetime and temporary safety program certificate requirements for off-highway recreational vehicles on behalf of Senator Ward. Senator Ward was asked to introduce this bill by the New Hampshire Off-Highway Vehicle Association, which represents OHRV clubs throughout the state who have been working on trying to pass similar legislation for 3 years. This legislation is a modified version of previous attempts and was worked on by stakeholders which include the Department of Fish and Game, New Hampshire Auto Dealers Association, and the OHRV industry. This bill would create a phased-in approach for acquiring OHRV riders born after January 1st, 1978 to take either a lifetime permanent training course or a temporary training course, which would be valid for 1 calendar year. It would grandfather in anyone born after 1978 and anyone who has already completed an approved Fish and Game training course either in New Hampshire or another state. This year's version of the bill only deals with OHRVs and not snowmobiles. Both industries are rapidly growing and helping our state's outdoor recreation economy, but this bill focuses on OHRVs, which rely more heavily on private land and especially the use of public roads. Training courses also already educate users on both OHRV and snowmobiles, so it would have a positive impact on both user groups. Members of our local OHRV clubs often are already knowledgeable and respectful of their communities. This bill aims to try and reduce the number of bad actors and accidents by having young out-of-state riders, especially renters, learn the rules on safety and to be better educated to respect our communities and private landowners, which are vital to preserve the existing trail system and valuable economic impacts OHRVs provide the tourism and outdoor recreation industries of our state. There were several amendments adopted in the Senate to improve this bill. The first amended the bill to make it clear the temporary certificate would be valid only for 1 calendar year, and that certificate would be ready by July 1st of 2024. Originally, they contemplated starting the temporary certificate in 2025 to give time for rulemaking, but the rental community asked for it to be done by July 1st of 2024 to ensure renters born after 1998 will also have to have access to the temporary option next season. The other change makes it absolutely clear a safety course will not be required for farming employees working on someone else's land. Stakeholders believe the bill would exempt this, but the language ensures that this will not. There will not be any confusion. Senator Ward asked for your support for the passage of Senate Bill 256 to help ensure riders are better equipped to operate their vehicles and help preserve safety on our thriving public and private trail system in the state. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I will defer any questions to the stakeholders and Fish and Game. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Chair recognizes Mike Willett. He's been here for a while, representing Medillac ATV Club. I hope I'm saying that correctly, in support of the bill.
Thank you very much, Chairman and the committee members. I'm here to support the bill, and I'm here today to talk about the club's point of view. My name is Mike Willett. I live in Colebrook. I'm a representative from Coas District 3. I'm also the trail administrator for the Metallic ATV Club. We're the largest AT club in the state with over 1,000 members and over 120 miles of trails. Over the last 15 years in the North Country, we've lost about 5,000 manufacturing jobs. So our economy has changed from a manufacturing logging economy to a tourist-based economy. So OHRV is a big part of our economy. There are over 1,000, let me rephrase that. There's over between 1,200 and 1,300 miles of trails in the state of New Hampshire, OHRV trails, with 1,000 of them being in the North Country alone. It's got such an economic impact, and I'm going to quote you some numbers. I'm not saying they're 100% correct, but my last reading, that's what they were. Skiing in the state of New Hampshire brings about $550 million of economic impact into the state. Snowmobiling is around $500 million, And the last study I saw for the OHRVs, it's $440 million of economic impact in the state of New Hampshire annually. So it's a very important part of our North Country economy. I won't go through the technical part of the bill, but this mandatory safety course is very similar to the very successful snowmobile course that's been going on for decades in the state of New Hampshire. The main problems we have with safety in both sports usually is because of inexperience and speed. And this bill will help target the inexperienced riders and also educate the aggressive young adults out there riding that need some education to be respectful. There are some challenges right now that OHRVers currently face. And one of the biggest problems is landowners and cooperating with landowners to open their land and also to allow us to have trails. A rider can come up into the North Country and ride 100 miles very easily, never see a house, never see a camp. Most riders that come in that area that ride those kind of distances think the land is public. It's not. More than in the North Country, over 90% of the land is privately owned. Some of the problems we have with riders is leaving trash, riding off trail, creating ruts when it's wet, not following or obeying signs, and excessive noise and dust. And what I think this bill can accomplish is just a few things that are very, very important. It can reduce accidents and injuries just through education. It's going to educate riders how to respect the landowners and understand the crucial role they play in this sport. Without cooperative landowners, we have no sport. It's that important. It's also going to educate riders how the clubs fit into this program. I know our club, in the last 2 years, rerouting a trail, we spent $370,000 building a trail, a single trail, to avoid some road sections, get away from houses, and appease some landowners. The club's share of that $370,000 was over $200,000. The state share was around $170,000. So the clubs have a very important part in the sport. Most riders that come up don't realize how important that part is. So it's important for them to learn the importance of the landowners and how crucial they are, to understand how the clubs fit in, cultivating trails, building trails, and retaining landowners. A lot of riders do not understand that the Bureau of Trails has a big part in this through their grant and aid program and helping the sport. And a lot do not understand the roles of Fish and Game and how they fit in this with their registrations, event permits, and law enforcement. In my opinion, there's no downside to this bill. There's a small inconvenience to riders to take their safety course, but it'll improve the sport and help protect it. I hope that you will support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Representative C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. On page 2 of the bill, they talk about operator date of birth and certificate retired. Are those on or before or on or after dates? It doesn't say. So as I read it, it means only if you were born on that particular January 1st that it applies.
I'll let Lieutenant Eastman stand to the technical part of it, but from what I understand, it was for people who were born a certain date in 1978 or later. If you were born pre-1978, you will not have to be part of the safety course. And I think that's to target the young, aggressive drivers.
Any further questions? And all set? Okay. Just one statement from me. I can do that on the chair. Did you say it's the Metallic ATV Club?
Yes.
And I apologize for my pronunciation, but so everybody knows, in my own defense, it's spelled Metallak. So thank you for that.
And for your information, Metallic was the last Native American living in that area.
Cut it out. Thank you very much for that.
And our trails go by his graveside.
No. Thank you. Chair, next up, recognizes Rich Parsons, representing the New Hampshire Off-Road Highway Vehicle Association, NOVA, in support of the bill.
Good afternoon, Chairman Walsh and members of the committee. My name for the record is Rich Parsons. I work at RYP Granite Strategies here in Concord, and I represent the New Hampshire Off-Highway Vehicle Association. We represent 25 OHV clubs throughout the state. And I think it was alluded to earlier that we've been working on something for several years to try and get something to work. I know the first version was based primarily on the boater safety certificate program, which has been very successful, but this takes a bit of a different approach. It's a little bit of a hybrid. For example, Vermont has a born after date that you're required to get it. So this takes a phased in approach, sort of like the boater safety program, but also a born after date. And to answer your question, Representative, on page 2, line 15, it says no person born after. So I think it should be assumed that those dates are if you're born after that date. If you're born on January 1st itself, that obviously would be a little confusing for you. But I think it's supposed to be if you're born after those days. So some information we have in terms of the folks that this would impact in 2024, under 25, based on 2022 registrations, it'd be roughly 6.5% of all riders were under the age of 25 that would have to complete or have something done in 2024. I think it was 996 residents and 1,008 non-residents. From there, the year after would be 16.5% of users, and 36 to 45, which would be in 2026, is about 19.5% of users. And the over 46 plus crowd, it makes up 57.7% of users. So the majority of users wouldn't be impacted by this. And I think it's also important to note that if you have already taken a course, you can use that as your lifetime certificate, whether in the state of New Hampshire or one recognized by Fish and Game. So there should be a good amount of people, especially those under the age of 25. Most of them likely took, if they started when they were youth, they likely took our safety training program already. And Fish and Game has records on all those folks that took it. So it's been mentioned already, so I'll just quickly say, our association supports this legislation, especially with our use and reliance on private lands. We think riders, especially renters, could benefit from additional etiquette to ride on these trails that these landowners are nice enough to allow us to use. And also for when they're riding on roads, because the roads are much different. Some of these vehicles, the tire pressure makes it unique in that they need to understand that it's going to ride differently when it's on a road. So the goal is to reduce accidents, increase etiquette for folks to help make sure that we can continue to have a thriving economy from these vehicles in the North Country and other parts of the state. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. I just got one to start off. Excuse me. I don't disagree with Representative C, and I agree with you that I think it's assumed that after is what's being intended. You've been working on the language on this?
Yes.
Can you find a different way to maybe clarify that? Because I agree with them.
Yes.
We can't really pass something that we assume is what we want. It's kind of got to be spelled out
Yeah.
a little clearer than that. So
Okay.
that would be appreciated. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sir, for being here. Under this category, are we including two-wheel, three-wheel, and four-wheel?
Anyone that is required to have, an OHRV registration that gets one in the state. So it's trail bikes, two wheels, three wheels, four wheels, UTVs, all those are included.
And can I just ask you, what is a gator?
Captain Eastman, I think, can probably answer that in a little more detail. I've
Okay.
never ridden on a gator myself.
It's a name brand.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it may be in here, and I might not have read it yet, and my apologies, but how much does this training course going to cost an individual, and how many hours or how much time would they have to put into it?
Yeah, so the in-person training courses are free. That you can sign up for one of the ones offered by Fish and Game or an approved training course. If you are doing the temporary certificate that is contemplated in the bill, that'll be offered through an approved program at a location. So I believe that is also free. The online course that is offered now, I think, is $35 if you want to take an online course. In terms of the time, I think the temporary, and I'll let Captain Eastman correct me if I'm wrong here, would be 30 minutes to an hour, or probably closer to an hour, whereas the lifetime certificate is like a 5 to 6 hour intensive class, in-person class.
Further questions? Seeing none, you're off the hook. Thank you very much. Next up, Chair recognizes Captain Eastman, representing the Hampshire Fish and Game, law enforcement in support of the bill. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Chair Walsh and the committee. As I said, my name is Michael Eastman. I'm a captain of the Hampshire Fish and Game Department Law Enforcement Division. I am in the coordinator of, actually the OHRV coordinator in charge of safety, education, and enforcement. My commission, Fish and Game Commission, has supported this bill. I'm really here to speak about the safety component of this and the capability of my agency to handle this course. As Rich Parsons said, we do have we have had for a very long time a live course which has a minimum of 5.5 hours of training. It's generally a day. I have regional coordinators and volunteers that put those on across the state, and they can be signed up for online through our website. We also have through Kelkamy, our online platform, which has been around for at least 5 years. I take that back, at least 6 to 8 years. I'm not 100% sure when that when it was incepted, but that is a $34.95 course, and that is none of that fee comes back to my agency. That is for Kelkamy to maintain that platform. So that is out there. It can be done. I've spoken with folks that did it in the amount of time to drive from Rhode Island to the state to actually to go and use the OHRV trails in our state. As far as the and that can be done at any time. The last I reviewed it was last year, and just looking at it took me about 3 hours to complete that, and that would be your course for where you would get your card in the mail from Kelkamy and be good for, it's a lifetime card. As far as the temporary course, which was something that the rental dealers looked for us to put in, that we would need to work with Kelkamy to get that online so that they could, so that a person could just go online and take that course and be ready for be ready to come. And what it would really be designed for is that if I were coming to the North Country or to anywhere in the state where I was going to rent an OHRV, that I would be able to do that prior to coming to the state, or I could do it at the rental agent, and we would look, in my mind, about an hour course, so and get them out there, and that would be heavy on etiquette and laws and rules of the road, that type of thing.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the committee? Wow. Seeing none. I don't even have one myself. Seeing, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is the last person I have signed up to speak on Senate Bill 256, so I'll close the public hearing. So we weren't too bad. Yeah, 25 minutes. The only other thing I want to mention, and I don't need answers today, I do have a list for anybody that would like to grab one at this point of the retained bills that we do have, retained House bills. Once we do exec these, historically, the speaker will let us start working on anything we have retained once we're caught up with our work here. So please help yourself to grabbing one of these, and take a look. And we have other handouts as well. And see if there's any of these committees, or what, we're gonna create subcommittees, any of these topics you'd be interested in helping with working on over the summer months and into the fall. So, that being said, I'll reach out, or if actually, when I do it better, I know I've got a couple issues with people going on work and vacation. We do have times, so reach out to me if you've got a particular day you can't make it to exec these. We'll leave it at that. Okay. If I don't hear from anybody, then I'll just pick it myself. But I'll try to make it so that we can all be here and we don't have to rely on replacements. If there's,
Likely be next week.
no. Yeah, no, we got plenty. We've got till June 1st.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait that long. But I know we've got a couple of the things we looked at today. There might be a few amendments to coming. So again, it won't be next week. And if there's a particular day outside of next week that doesn't work for you, let me know. Yeah, I'm going to stick with Tuesdays. Yep. No other questions? Seeing none, thanks very much. And we'll see you soon.